I need a few minutes before I begin recording. You guys are not supposed to have a chat room right now. At all. I turned that feature off purposefully. Trunk Monkeys, I'm definitely going to need you to stay in the chat room or somebody with a wrench to be prepared to throw down, because I will be met with opposition. And I don't have time to monitor my chat. It's not that I don't have time. I can't monitor my chat and read. And do all this at the same time. Mary Lou, hello from Washington. New Jersey says hello right back. Hello, Karen, Tyler, Trunk. All right. We'll see how it goes. Let me see. Copy. Darn it. I turned that feature off. I'm like really distraught about it right now. No, I'm not going to let you see the hostess with the mostess. I'm just too sparkling beautiful right now for you to look at me. I have to calm down a minute. I'm kidding. I'm joking. All right. Do I have everything? No, of course I don't. My browser is checking to see if it can access my Gab account. Hey, Trunk, you want to do me a favor and throw this up on your page and then link it to mine on Gab? Hey, Moa, it's great to see you. Shield Maiden, be ready for the trolls. Okay, now I have it pulled up. Where am I? I guess I'm ready. Video capture. There I am. So I'm Holly Baglio, your hostess with the mostest from HTV, broadcasting to you live from Holly Television Studios in my home state of New Jersey, in what was once known as the United States of America. I will be reading to you this evening my autobiography in part 1, so I anticipate it'll take about 4 hours. However, there will be some interruptions. I did not expect there to be a chat room. I was pretty much hoping that that was not going to happen. No offense to my friends, just complete insult meant towards those who troll me. You know. Alright, so let me get my screen straight. I'll be watching, man. Okay, so this is part 1, my normal life. Alright, first the preface. I hope that Yeshua and Yud-Heh-Vav and the Holy Spirit work through me while I'm reading this, because I definitely want to be animated while I read my own autobiography to you, so you can hear the tones in my voice. Okay, so that's what I'm hoping for, is definitely the feeling and emotion to go into my voice while I'm reading this. So the preface. Hey, Jonathan, Yono, Shabbat Shalom. I dedicate this book to the kids in the cage. This book was written solely for and with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yeshua called me to give my testimony, and this is it. It is with thought to safety and privacy that I will not use anyone's name in this book. I want to extend all due respect, love, and courtesy to others. This book is about my life. This book comes with a strong trigger warning. Due to computer crashes and hackers and people trying to steal my testimony, I published my first rough draft as soon as I got the copyrights back. I raised Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, YHVH, the letters, above everyone and everything else. Please note that is why I'm capitalizing his name and title. I give him worship, glory, respect, love, praise. That's the word, praise. When I discuss something from the darkness, which is not within Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's love, I type it in lowercase. It is not worthy of my respect or acknowledgement. Usually I am referring to the finite deities and fallen entities, fallen angels, aliens, demons that have no business on this earth or around humans. Aliens are fallen angels. They are not extraterrestrials or ancient astronaut ancestors. Special thank you to my editor, Anna, who believes me and did my editing process for free. I am humbled by that. She is a prayer warrior for us survivors, and I bless the day I met her because she has brought a lot to my life, and I am so very thankful. Can I already, take a break? I love you, Galen. All right, so I guess from here on out, I'm not going to acknowledge my chat until I have to get up and take care of some things. Already I'm starting, okay? You can see it. I'm getting, nervous because you're going to see my face and everything while I read it. Jeez, I hope I look okay. That'll help things a lot better. A lot better. Alright, here we go. My normal life. So, my normal life, just to give you a heads up, goes from the time I was born until the time I sent this writing off to get my copyrights. I sent this off to get my copyrights October of 2019, I believe, and then I published the rough draft December 2019. I published the final draft July 16th of 2020, to give you an idea. Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to hop to it. God loves you. That is what my grandparents who raised me used to say when I was growing up. They never made me go to church. However, they made sure I knew who God is. As I grew up through the years, I knew I was different. I could see good angels, demons, and little gray aliens just as you see this page filled with words. My dreams would come true, whether they were about my life or someone else's. My grandmother would talk to me about God and Jesus. When I was young, I told God that if Jesus was his son, I would believe it and do as he says. I accept Jesus. One evening when I was about 5 years old, God allowed Enoch to visit me. Enoch told me a story about the angels, good and bad. When I woke up, I told my grandmother Enoch visited me. To my 5-year-old mind's understanding, he had said he was my great-great-great-great-great-great-great going on great-great-great-grandfather. My grandmother told me not to bother him again and to stop calling on him to tell me stories. I never knew who Enoch was until I turned 40 years old, when I heard the book of Enoch for the very first time. It matched what Enoch told me. My grandmother told me not to bother him again and to stop calling on him to tell me stories. I never knew who Enoch was until I turned 40 years old, when I heard the book of Enoch for the very first time. It matched what Enoch told me when I was a child. It was truly humbling to read that book. It is truly humbling to read that book now. What an honor and what a pleasure. Enoch was always one of my favorite people in the Holy Bible. I was born breech on September 12, 1974 at 8:18 p.m. 8:18 p.m. My grandmother was a military wife. My grandfather was SCI, World War II, on a minesweeper ship as an assistant cook. He would come home and tell my grandmother how the Navy would give him and the other soldiers LSD and marijuana just to see what it would do to them. I believe that my grandfather was an unknowing and involuntary candidate in human experimentation projects. He was in the reserves after World War II. My grandparents raised me, and living with them has always been the best part of my life. I love them so much. Every year they would take me on vacation to Niagara Falls, Kings Dominion in Virginia, Wildwood, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and many, many other places. Occasionally, they would let me pick one of my cousins or a neighbor to go with me so I would not be alone, especially if we were going to an amusement park. Most of the time, it was just the three of us going on vacation. I was always happiest when I was with Graham and Papa. To me, they were my mother and father. That is still how to me, they were my mother and father. That is still how I view them. I used my grandfather's sleeping bag when my cousins would come to stay overnight with me. I remember one time I lost a teddy bear and I was so upset. Lo and behold, Papa went to the reserves to spend a weekend. When Papa went to unroll his sleeping bag in front of the other soldiers, my teddy bear fell out. Papa said all the other soldiers started to laugh and never let him live it down. On those weekends when he had to go back, the other soldiers would jokingly tease him and ask, "Hey, Bill, did you remember to bring your teddy bear again?" He really enjoyed those weekends at the reserves. The last year of my grandfather's life, he suffered a heart attack. It postponed the trip to Hawaii that Graham and Papa were planning. After that first heart attack, everything went downhill. Papa suffered a stroke from a test the doctor had done, causing him to be paralyzed on his left side. When he came home from the hospital, Grandma took care of him, and I helped her. She would bathe him. I would hold Papa up straight so she could put lotion on him and get him dressed. He was in a wheelchair and needed help. Papa loved listening to Patsy Cline. At dinner time, the three of us would always laugh together. There was a movie called The Breakfast Club. On TV, they would mute out the bad words and dub over it. In the movie, they dubbed over and would say, "Flip you," instead of the bad word, the F-bomb, to tell off another character. When I told Papa about this movie and the dubbing, he got a kick out of it. Graham, Papa, and I created an inside joke with each other. Anytime one of us asked a question, Papa, Graham, or I would reply, "Flip you and get it yourself." We would laugh and laugh. I would always tease Papa about his beach ball belly, as the rest of him was so skinny. The last year of his life, if my memory serves me correctly, he had 3 heart attacks and several strokes. There came a point one night when Papa was suffering badly. I could tell Graham was growing weary and tired. No one from the rest of the family helped, even when they said they would. Graham was known for being the caregiver to all the members in our family. For example, when her brother fell sick, she would cook for him and visit him daily. One night, while Papa was in the hospital, the phone rang. The phone startled me. I could tell it was not going to be a good phone call. When I walked out into the kitchen, I heard Graham crying and telling them to take him off life support. She almost fell over, and I ran to catch her. Papa passed away June 21st, 1988, when I was 13 years old. It was devastating, and I never got over the pain from the loss. It really angered me that although my biological mother allowed me to attend the wake, she would not allow me to attend the funeral. She cut off my ability to mourn. When I was at Papa's wake, I kept praying for Papa to sit up and get out of the casket. I was shattered. My dad, my biological father, and I were kept apart by my biological mother. They divorced when I was 3 years old. Therefore, I waited until I was 18 to reach out to him to meet him. I wrote my dad a letter, and he responded back immediately. He was just as upset to miss out on my formative years as I was to be without him. The first time we met, I was in the hospital. My grandmother baked him an apple pie and went to see him. She told him how happy he made me and welcomed him to meet me in person. He came to visit me in the hospital. The nurse told me I had a visitor, but since it was a man, I would have to come into the hallway where there was a sitting area for the visit. When I got out of bed and looked down the hallway, I saw him. It was like looking into my own eyes. I was a spitting image of him. I ran as fast as I could into his arms. It was a dream come true for me to be reunited with my father. I remembered him from when I was 3 years old, when he would take me swimming and play color forms with me. We had a wonderful relationship for 7 years until his death. I called his fiancée Mom. She was so sweet to me, and we always enjoyed talking to each other. Mom was always going to New York City and buying me dresses and clothes for work. The three of us were very close. My dad told me his side of the family had mafia connections, and that when I was younger there were prearranged plans for my marriage. However, since I was kept from him, the plans had been canceled, and the odd thing is, a few months after Dad told me this, a boy from another well-known Italian family asked me on a date. We had got along, but I did not look at him romantically. He asked me if I still would agree to the marriage. I told him sorry, but no. He went on to marry another girl shortly thereafter. Dad passed away July 2nd, 2000. Multi-dimensional holographic aliens. When I was between the ages of 3 to 5 years old, I was plagued with nightmares that seemed to occur every single night when I lay down before bedtime. It looked like little gray aliens would enter my bedroom and circle around my bed, scaring me into a terrible fright. These were 4-dimensional holographic images sent to reinforce MKUltra programming, which is a topic I will discuss later in the book. This means that there is a visual image, sounds that can be heard, smells that can be perceived, and an atmosphere change that can be discerned. I would hide under the covers and only leave a small gap between the sheets so I could breathe. I did not like their smell. There was one little gray alien that appeared to stand in the... This is the one that reinforced it right here. So I need to really go back and rearrange some of the sentences a little bit. Forgive me. So the aliens coming into my room and gathering around my bed, that was not reinforcing the MKUltra programming. That was real. I would see the little gray aliens. They'd pop in at the top corners by the doors, and along the edge of the door. And you'd see one pop in, and then the rest would trail behind, circle around the bed. That was real. But this was the holographic image to reinforce the MKUltra programming. There was one little gray alien that appeared to stand between the dresser and corner wall. It would watch me sleep all night long, every night. When I would call out to Gran because I was scared, she would run into my room, but she couldn't see the alien. Instead, she told me it was just a nightmare, give me a drink of water, and put me back into bed. My grandmother bought a winter owl figurine. I used to love little figurines as a kid. It was my favorite of all the figurines. It would change color for snow, sunshine, rain, clouds, and cool days. That owl sat on my windowsill for many, many, many years while I grew up. Now that I am older, I have learned that aliens hide behind an owl form to conceal themselves. In addition, I have found out this was to reinforce the MKUltra programming, which is over my bed. When I was about 4 to 8 years old, on a few occasions in the middle of the night, I had nightmares that witches were standing over me, cackling. It looked like they were circling around a pot of boiling water. They were saying something I could not quite understand, but it always caused me to have an out-of-body experience. I floated upwards to the ceiling and out through the roof of my house. I floated up to where the witches were cackling. I do not remember what would happen to me once I reached them in the air. Another time when I had nightmares as a child, I was shown the rings of Saturn and how the earth was going to be wrapped in similar rings. As I understood it, the rings are meant to enslave Saturn, and they are going to enslave us here on earth too. Stairway to Heaven. God showed me the stairway to heaven when I was about 6 years old. I saw things going up and down the stairway. When I awoke, I went outside to where I saw the stairway to heaven from my dream. Even then, while I was awake, I had visions of the stairway, and I would watch in awe. My grandmother was always very gentle with me when it came to talking about God and the Holy Bible. She may have found my stories entertaining at the time, but she never forced me to believe in Jesus or go to church. She would not even force-feed me vegetables when I refused to eat them at the dinner table. However, she made it known who Jesus is and what he did for me. What I've learned since then is to cast down these demons. You can take authority of them in the name of Jesus. I don't think my grandparents knew about that. You can read about it in the Holy Bible, but I think sometimes people don't know how to cast these things down. And when I was a little kid, I didn't know. Muppet Show. When I was a little girl of about 4 years old, at 8 every night, the Muppet Show by Jim Henson would come on TV. It's funny, I gotta pause right now because it's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My alarm is about to go off, I kid you not, in 3 minutes. Too funny. Alright, you know what? Give me a second. So this way I can just pause here for a minute, go flip the pot roast, and I'll be right back. I better not move the camera or my seat because then I'll completely lose position. I think I'm good here. I'm not sure. So it's not me who's crooked. It's the camera. All right. I'll be right back. I'm here. Since I'm up, it's good to see you, Nora, sweetheart. Since I'm up, I'm going to grab an iced tea, so just give me a couple of seconds. I'm sorry. I'm back. Sorry it took so long. Right? I don't know what's happening, but when my text messages come through, it doesn't make a noise. I miss them. Like, I got 4 since I started this broadcast. What does your weekend schedule look like? I didn't hear any of these messages go off. Alright, so back to work. Guys ready? Berry Peas Parlor is down. I got Parlor and it gave me so many problems. I just took it off. Hey, V-Borg, what's up? Alright, so it's 8:07 Eastern Standard Time. You guys ready for the next part of my book? The next chapter, rather? This is just my normal life. So, like, my autobiography is going to be 3 sections. Probably about 4 hours each video. Cheers. Well, it's still cheers. This is a virgin iced tea, not a Long Island. That'll happen New Year's 2021. Esther Tyler, hello. How are you? It's good to see you. Yes, I was hoping that there would not, don't take offense, I was just hoping there wouldn't be a live chat. That way I could just read through this, but it never happens that way. It's alright. But, alright, without further ado, because if I stall too much longer, this is going to take 5 hours, so. Alright. You guys ready? Alright. It's getting late, okay? The next chapter of my book is called Muppet Show. When I was a little girl of about 4 years old, at 8, every night the Muppet Show by Jim Henson would come on TV. I have to digress. And what are we on right now? HTV. All right, back to the book. I watched that show. Oh, this is funny because I talk about HTV. You'll see. Hey, Lincoln. All right, I got to get back to this. I watched that show before I fell asleep at night. One night while I was watching the segment of Pigs in Space, God gave me my first awake vision. My vision flipped to an evangelist who is well known today. It was her husband, and 3 of their many children who were sitting behind a desk on my television. Instead of the Muppet Show characters, the evangelist and her family were wearing aluminum foil hats. They spoke to me stating, "Holly, the world is ending. Come with us." At that very moment, I jumped from my bed and ran out to the kitchen where Grandma and Papa sat. I told them, "Grandma, Papa, hurry, we have to go. The world is ending." The show told me, "Grandma, Papa, hurry, we have to go. The world is ending. The show told me." Grandma and Papa turned to me, smiling gently, and said, "Holly, that was the end of the Muppet Show, not the end of the world. It is time for you to go to bed." Much later in life, God would lead me to this evangelist once she grew up and began her own ministry. Next chapter, Yellow Orange Planet. I want to tell recollections I have from before I was born here on Earth. I want to tell recollections I have from before I was born here on Earth. I remember God and His workshop. I remember when I was created. I was shy and small, but bright with colors. I hid behind Abba's chair. He and I always had fun, and he paid so much attention to me. He always made me giggle. At times he would tickle me. He created me. We were all up in heaven before we were born here on Earth. We were all up in heaven before we were born in flesh on Earth. We are all spiritual beings in a flesh suit right now, but we all started in heaven. Just like each snowflake and star is unique, we each have our own individuality. In fact, some of the material Abba used to make stars, he used in making us. It is harnessed in our bodies and chemistry systems. Abba gives us each our own star. Abba is everywhere in heaven. I want to warn people against false hope that they will have God in eternity without Jesus. God is not in the hearts of people who do not accept His Son, our Savior. God Himself in the flesh, Jesus Christ. The eternal destination of anyone without Him is the lake of fire. God is not there. Up in heaven before we were all born, God was everywhere and with us all the time. God is everywhere in heaven, so you can be alone with Him, but He is still with other people. I remember when Jesus came to God's workshop the first time for me to meet Him. Heavenly Abba had to coax me out from behind His chair. I was so shy and timid. When I looked at Jesus, He smiled so big, but I kept hiding behind Abba's chair. I did not want to leave Abba's workshop, but Abba told me I am made for Jesus. Therefore, I came out of hiding and ended up falling in love with Jesus just as much as I love my Heavenly Father. Jesus and I left Heavenly Abba's workshop together. Abba saw us off. We put on yellow parachutes and jumped into space. Then we landed on our yellow-orange planet. Our feet left marks on the ground. Our parachutes deflated, and He ran over to me and gave me a huge hug. We walked around the backside of our yellow-orange planet. There was a sea of sparkling, colorful water and trees all around. There were hills of flowers shining brilliant colors, emanating soft smells. Everything was in harmony. I was comfortably warm all the time. Jesus and I went swimming in the sea. In heaven there are private places with Jesus that appear like stars or shining planets in the dark sky. Jesus was with others, giving them their own one-on-one time, yet I still had him for myself. I saw other meeks, brothers and sisters, on those shining places with Jesus too. Jesus and I were like kids. He jumped from one side of the planet to the other, thereby leaving a line across it. He would slide from the top of that line all the way down the planet to the bottom of the line, and he would go so fast. I was scared, so Jesus would start me about a quarter of the way up the line to slide down with me versus starting at the top. I did not like heights or moving too fast. He and I would hang upside down together and talk. We had a home on our planet, and one day when we were in our home, a knock came. Jesus opened the door, and there were 3 archangels standing there. I believe they were Uriel, Michael, and Gabriel. They came to talk to Jesus, my golden bow. I am his holy white hot silver arrow, Selah. I also remember Lucifer before he started rebellion and war in heaven. He was tossed out on his ear from heaven and now is called Satan here on earth. Lucifer always attracted the attention of some of the brothers and sisters for being the most beautiful angel. Those future humans flocked to Lucifer, never paying attention to Heavenly Abba. I remember some of my brothers and sisters from up there in heaven when I see them down here on earth. They do not remember me, but I remember them. When people are born, Gabriel says, shh, and places his finger over their lips beneath their nose and leaves an indent. He shushes us because if we remember where we came from, we would automatically choose to go back. That would take away the gift of free will that Heavenly Abba gave to us humans so that we could seek him here on earth. He gave us a choice. I remember Jesus came back to me after talking to those angels. He told me that he had to go away. Heavenly Abba had something for him to do and I could not come with him. He said it would be a long time before he would be home again. He said that what he had to do was like a test that he had to pass. When Jesus left there for earth, I cried my heart out. I went to the top of that line where he jumped across the entire planet in one leap. I went to the top of that line where I was scared of the height and scared of sliding down too fast. And I laid up there crying and crying and crying. Oh, how my heart broke and ached for my golden bow, Jesus. Lucifer showed up, appearing as a dark man on my orange planet. He tricked me, and he said he knew where Jesus was. All I had to do was go with him, and he would take me to Jesus. When I fell for that bad, dark man's lies, it made me fall off my planet and left a visible dark mark, a dark blemish on it. The next thing I know, I am born here on earth. Here I am still chasing after a perfect lamb. I remembered this since I was 3 years old. I stopped speaking of it in kindergarten when a girl made fun of me for seeing it and saying it. She told me I could never go back to my yellow-orange planet where I was with Jesus. Vision of the rapture. The second awake vision God gave me when I was in kindergarten. I was approximately 5 years old. I sat in class drawing pictures with my friends. While I sat there drawing, God came to me and said, "Holly, when you see me in the sky and I call for you, come running to me, Holly." In that vision, he showed me himself coming in the sky with his loud yell. I got up from my chair in kindergarten class and ran outside to where we played recess. Next, I saw a whole bunch of good heavenly angels coming down to get me and other people. The next thing I knew, something happened to me and I was in the sky with God. When the vision ended, I sat in class quietly and never told a soul of what God showed me. The kids at school began bullying me at this time. The teacher and counselors called home when I was in grammar school to tell my grandmother how they thought I had learning disabilities and that I was different from the other kids. For example, the color wheel. I would see a yellow-orange color that sparkled to the left of the color wheel chart in school. The other students would laugh at me because they did not see it, only I did. When I did tell one girl in class how I had been to the yellow-orange planet with God before I was born here on Earth, she told me I could never go back. I began crying and never spoke of this again. Okay, so I have to do some more editing. But that's when I was being made fun of the yellow-orange planet. But it's there. It's its own color. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I had been held back and put in core classes. The bullying in school began. I went from kindergarten to 1st grade. I was held back and placed in pre-first. Then I went on to 2nd grade. In 2nd grade, kids began making fun of me because I was hyperactive. My desk was put in the back of the classroom to face the wall. As a child, I was always a daydreamer and easily distracted. I hated sitting in school. 3rd grade was the same thing. I was taken out of my regular class and made to attend core classes where teachers would teach me to read fluently. I was very choppy when I spoke or read from a book. I had trouble pronouncing certain words and completing sentences. The school said I had ADD and learning disabilities. In the 4th grade, my biological mother met my stepfather and got remarried. My 4th grade teacher adored me. He said I was the most polite, well-behaved, and well-mannered child he had ever met. He took a liking to me. My biological mother and stepfather did nothing but joke around. However, when they joked around, I would take them seriously. Many times they belittled me, so when they were supposedly joking around, I saw no difference. They were always telling me how stupid I was. When my biological mother became pregnant, she and my stepfather told me to tell my teacher that he could adopt me once she was born. I went back and told my teacher. He wrote a letter and sent it home to my biological mother. I think he and his wife were unable to have children and always wanted one. My biological mother went to the principal's office the next day to try to get the teacher fired. I've always felt it was her fault, not the teacher's. She was always violently joking with me, but I could not tell the difference between her jokes and seriousness, which ran closer to the lines of verbal abuse. That teacher never spoke to me for the rest of the year, which made things really bad and awkward for me at school. I was so embarrassed. Blonde, curly-haired boy. Jeez. Everybody takes this part the wrong way. They really do. That's why. I had dreams about a little boy with blonde curly hair starting when I was about 5 years old, probably younger. These dreams continued sporadically throughout my life until I was 19. Sometimes I felt during the dream like I was along for the ride and could only watch things happen. I remember these dreams continued into my teenage years. In one dream, I woke up and found myself lying on sand next to this blonde, curly-haired boy. I jumped to my feet and began to run away, but I collided straight into the side of the tent or wooden shed that we were in, thus knocking myself back down to the ground. I looked back at the blonde, curly-haired boy and sighed in frustration. I could not understand why I kept dreaming of him. Who was he? It seemed like I was watching someone else live their life in my dreams as he grew and transformed through the years. When I was a little girl, I would play for hours, having my games, books, and toys spread out. Of course, I was in everybody's way that needed to use the bathroom. The bookcase was in the hallway near the bathroom, and I used to play librarian. I was drawing pictures of lines with crayons and looking through encyclopedias. I always loved studying the old style maps. These kinds of maps displayed the oceans with illustrations of monsters, mermaids, and other dangers in the sea. On continents, the maps displayed castles, empires, kings, and bad places to stay away from. When I saw these old-fashioned maps, I began having awake visions. I saw the beast of Revelation rise out of the pit. As soon as I had that awake vision, I was given a second vision of that blonde, curly-haired boy. I was so young that I had no idea what an awake vision was and glossed over it, thinking it was only my imagination. One day when I was about 11 years old, I came home from school feeling so tired. I flipped on the television to a pastor preaching and asking for money. Actually, it could have been a little bit younger than 11. But anyway, I flipped on the television to a pastor preaching and asking for money. As I nodded off for a nap, his voice from the television echoed through my head. The next thing I knew, I was having a nightmare. I saw a beast rise from a bottomless pit, breaking his chains. Then he was free. He came out of the bottomless pit. Upon him sat a whore who worshipped him. I woke in a frightful sweat. At the time, I had no understanding or knowledge of the Holy Bible, let alone the canon of Revelation. I had no idea the pastor was corrupt. He was worshiping the beast, but sounded like he was preaching Jesus' gospel when he was not. I was so troubled by this nightmare that I called the pastor's hotline to plant a seed. When the operator answered, she asked me to make a donation. I did not understand why I needed to have money to plant a seed. The pastor scared me, thinking that God would not want me unless I planted a seed, but without money, I could not do any of that. Again, while on the phone with this pastor's operator, I had an awake vision of the blonde, curly-haired boy from my dreams. Later that day, the pastor's hotline called my house back. The operator spoke to my grandmother. She said something to the effect of, "It is so cute your granddaughter called for God and to plant a seed for God, but she didn't have any money." It touched my heart and I had to call you back. Would you like to make a donation? My grandmother graciously declined the operator's offer. I like how I worded that. My grandmother graciously declined the operator's offer, hung up the phone, and smiled gently on me. She too saw the love in my heart I had for God. She scolded me. She never scolded me, but she hugged me instead. Much later in life, God would lead me to this little blonde, curly-haired boy. Once he grew up and began a ministry of his own, I would need that ministry to help me. Learning disabilities and bullies. In nursery school, I would come home with bruises all around my ribs and torso. The other kids would pick me up and swing me around like a little baby doll. I was much smaller than all the other kids, and they treated me like I was their toy. They would play and make me the baby, putting me in a stroller to push around, or they would lock me in the small playhouse and leave me there. My grandmother changed my nursery school 3 times until she found one where I would be safe because the kids did not push me around. In kindergarten, I had trouble getting the learning assignments correct. One of the girls would let me copy off of her so I would not make mistakes and the teacher would not make me do it over again. That teacher was so mean to me. I went on to first grade, and that is where they noticed my learning disabilities. Immediately, they put me in core classes. Core classes had 3 teachers to 6 kids. They taught us how to read and do math. I hated it because one of the teachers always had the worst smelling breath, and it would make me nauseated. None of the other students liked when she sat next to them to help us read. I had a touch of dyslexia and suffered from ADD. In school, I was always the one daydreaming and staring out the window. I was often scolded for doing such. As a child, I was often sick. I missed school so much I was held back and stayed in pre-first. When I finally made it to 2nd and 3rd grade, I was hyperactive, and the teacher, I already went through this. The teacher would always take my desk and put it in the back of the room facing the wall, separate from the other students. This is when the bullying started for me. I was not only hyperactive. They made fun of me all the time, and they would not be friends with me. I remember in grammar school I would get sick often, and my grandmother would keep me home. I always had stomach aches or would get sick with high fevers. My biological mother made the decision to have my tonsils removed, as the doctor told her they were nothing but scar tissue. It was due to my having strep throat 3 times in one winter. After the surgery, I immediately came down with bronchial asthma and allergies to everything. For me, suffering bad health started at this point and negatively impacted my life. I went on to junior high school, and they kept me in core classes until 8th grade. I fought to get out of core classes before I started high school. Once in high school, I still had a terrible time with my grades and trying to learn everything they expected of us. I averaged C's and D's, but still managed to pass. In high school, the bullying progressed. I was no longer made fun of for my grades, but more for my hair, the clothes I wore, and for the boy I liked. The other girls would often threaten to kick my ass. To this day, I still honestly do not know why they made fun of me. I never had the same friends as them, and I stayed away from them. There was always a group of about 5 girls. They made my 4 years of high school the worst 4 years of my life. Name calling was one thing, but when they started physically threatening me on a weekly basis, I started lifting weights at home to make sure I had the strength to protect myself when they came to beat me up. Of course, they never did, but they struck fear in me. I was terrified. Next chapter, 9 years old. I woke from a dream when I was 9 years old, and I wrote my first poem. It was named Merry Go Round. I have some of it memorized, but I no longer have my poems. I used to love writing poetry. I would sit there all day long, happy and content, reading the dictionary and writing poems. Later in my 20s, I entered and won many contests. I received 2 trophies, a medal, and 3 Editor's Choice Award certificates for my poems. 3 were so good they had them read by professional speakers with an orchestra playing in the background. I wrote about 2,000 poems in 36 years. I always called writing my passion. Now, YESHUA, my golden bow, is. Sadly, around this same time of 9 years old, with the good dreams I had, the nightmares came too. The nightmares were so bad that my grandmother moved me into her bedroom. Papa was moved into mine. Plus, he snored, which kept Gram awake. Gram had to sleep between me and the bedroom door, though. When I had nightmares, they would be so terrible that I would jump up from sleeping in bed and go running full steam ahead and screaming towards the front door of the house to get out. One night, Papa was coming home from working the night shift as a machinist. As he was approaching the front door of the house, I went running and screaming out of it, and he caught me before I ran past him. I was about 8. I had nightmares of little gray aliens, demon, gory things, witches over my bed, and kids in cages, electrocution, and Satan himself. Sometimes while I was awake, I would get bad visions of these types of things and go into a sort of trance. I had dreams about other people, and these dreams would come true. I could tell you what was going to happen before it happened. That was another reason why my nightmares were so terrifying. I did not know if these nightmares were going to come true like the other dreams did. Lo and behold, the nightmares did turn out to be true, but I did not find that out until I was 40 years old, and I will discuss that later in the book. It was hard for me to explain these things because everybody would chalk it up to growing pains or stress or some other medical diagnosis. In hindsight, I was demonstrating clear signs of being an MKUltra and SRA victim. No one around me could recognize it, including myself. Baptized Episcopalian. My biological was remarried when I was 9 years old. When I was 11, they had my half-sister and I baptized. I had no idea what a baptism meant at this time. It made no sense to me why they poured water on my head. I did not know why my biological mother waited so long in the first place to get me baptized, since I had been talking to God since I started forming words as a baby. I never felt comfortable saying anything, and I still do not. Meeting Satan, age 13. Around the time my papa died, Satan began visiting me. Satan did not stop doing that until I was about 16. It all started the last week Papa was alive. I started to see a creature in my bed. I started to see a creature in my bedroom. A few days later, Papa died. Graham and I took the loss of him very badly. We were completely devastated. I believe God allowed Papa to visit Graham to say goodbye. Papa appeared to my grandmother while she was sleeping one night and sat down on the bed beside her. Papa told Graham that he was not suffering. They made amends for anything they thought they had done wrong to the other. They talked about what to do now that he is gone. He asked her to protect Whiffet and look out for her growing up. Whiffet is me. It is a nickname he made up for me as a child. Graham and Papa were able to say I love you to one another one last time before God took him. The next morning, my Graham told me all about it. Afterwards, I confessed to her a visit to heaven happened to me in my sleep during the night. God took me to heaven. Next chapter. God brought me to heaven when Papa died in 1983. I saw sapphires, rubies, emeralds, amethysts around golden walkways with pillars on either side. I saw beautiful buildings. When I asked God who the people were that were there watching us, God answered, "Those are your ancestors, Holly. They are your elders." I recognized Enoch, who stood among them. God and I strolled down the walkway and continued talking. I noticed the sapphire color in particular, since it is my birthstone of September, and I wanted to get a closer look. The sapphires were so blue that the blue had colors inside of it, and they smelled beautiful. I turned my head back around to look at God, and he smiled at me and told me that from now on he will be my father. I continued to admire the sapphire. It felt like I could sink into it like warm, fluffy cotton. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in bed. My grandmother told me that God loves me, and so does she. Then came the night when Satan showed himself. He always sat by my bedside. He would spend the nights talking and talking and talking to me. He would explain to me what he and the other fallen entities had planned for man. Sometimes I spoke back to him or would write down what he said. I knew to be cautious of him, but I didn't know of any way for me to stop him. I was at his disposal whenever he wanted. One time Satan wanted me to sit down at a table and play a gambling type of game with him. He told me he could make me famous and wealthy. Instead, I sat quietly with my hands folded and did not speak a word. A few moments later, I left the table. I would not play because I was scared Satan would take my grandmother, and then I would have no one left to love and care for me. He visited me on many occasions. Satan can appear like the most handsome man you have ever seen in your life, or he can appear like that creature named Pan. It has a goat's head, hooves, and a tail. The skin of that creature is red and tight, not like human skin. When he would appear as a handsome man, he spoke very charmingly. Whatever his appearance was, when Satan showed up, walking through my bedroom door, all the nightmares I had before paled in comparison to him. He would take me inside of his dreams, which meant he would take me out of my body and astral travel me to somewhere else. I would wake up from sleep and sit up in bed. When I looked behind myself, I saw my body laying fast asleep. One time I looked up to see an angelic being with 4 faces. It was very tall and had thick legs. However, something was different about it. It was gray and dark colored, not like a good angel from God. I recognized it as Lucifer, the fifth cherub who caused a rebellion in heaven and tricked a third of the angels into following him. There are now 4 heavenly cherubim, and you can read about them in the Holy Bible. One night, out of the corner of my eye, I suddenly saw something horrible. I looked to the right, and there was Satan. He gestured to me. He took me out of my body. Okay, so I see this. I'll just stick to the book. One night, out of the corner of my eye, I suddenly saw something horrible. I looked to the right, and there was Satan. He gestured to me. He took me out of my body to the Devil's Circle in the UK. When he took me there, I was very scared, and I was alone with him. He walked around the Devil's Circle opposite of me. That's in New England. Somehow I was dressed in a white long nightgown and barefoot. He screamed at me to get inside. I stalled and said no. He roared, and it seemed like his voice caused an earthquake. I took a few steps forward toward him and then reluctantly stepped inside the circle. I do not remember what happened after that because it all goes black before my eyes. I was extremely frightened. I had no idea that if I called out to Jesus, he would have saved me because no one taught me that. He would have stopped Satan from bringing me to that circle. Therefore, when these things happened to me, I suffered through the whole entire attack. Had I known about Jesus, I would have been able to stop this attack through him, his blood, his sacrifice. During this time of my life, my biological mother promoted tarot cards versus me having a holy Bible. I tampered with tarot cards, rune stones, sun cards, summoning rituals, and magic. I was reading books about Nostradamus and Aleister Crowley. I tampered with these things, and even though I was falling under spiritual attacks every night that I went to sleep as a teenager, I never attributed them to each other. Many times I saw a portal open up in my bedroom. I would wake up terrified because entities were millimeters away from my face. I would startle and have to blink several times to get focus back in my eyes. By the time it seemed like the scary entities sank back into the corner of the walls or outlets and behind furniture, becoming a part of the scenery. When I saw the portal in my bedroom open, it was shaped like a hypnotist wheel made of barbed wire. I saw entities come through and enter this world. It was frightening when this happened. Other times I would wake up and little gray aliens would be levitating me off the bed. Sometimes they would take me out of the house. Due to sleep paralysis, I could not move or get up to stay awake, so I would have to fall back to sleep, and then I would go back into the dreams. There came a time when little gray aliens stopped torturing me and started to teach me things, such as how their aircraft worked going from point A to point B. They would type in a coordinate or pick a point using a wraparound. Their technology was beyond my normal understanding. Whatever it was they did with their technology, they made it seem really simple. Really simple. It seemed like they hopped from one point to the next destination, unlike a conventional airplane that needs time to travel from one place to another. Their ship had an eerie, ominous feeling to it and smelled like urine. The aircraft seemed to react with you. It was as if you were plugged into it and became one entity. On one certain abduction, they played a holographic movie of Jesus' crucifixion. It seemed like they were trying to lower Jesus to their level so he didn't seem almighty. They wanted him to seem like just another deity. They most definitely did not show his resurrection. The nightmares progressed as I grew up. In middle school, I remember sitting in class and being zoned out, staring off into space. My mind was everywhere, and sometimes it felt like if I zoned out long enough, I could leave my body and go to any other place I wanted. One day while I was sitting in class, I left my body. This is not something I chose to do, but this was something done to me. I remember I could manipulate my body, but my spirit was hundreds of miles away somewhere in a military intelligence lab, my lab. At times, it felt like it was only my imagination running away with me, and that was what was happening. And what was happening could not possibly be true. I never knew how to explain these things to people. All the people I had shared with so far treated me like I was crazy. In the 7th grade in history class, we had a very great teacher. He would divide the class into idiots and morons. Both words have the same definition. This teacher maintained a sense of humor and kept the class interested. He rocked across the board. We were in a core class because all of us were slow learners compared to the rest of the kids in school. He would give each student on each team, idiots versus morons, their own 3 questions, right? He would average our individual grades together with the grade of each team. It was a curved grading system. We all walked out loving world history because of this one teacher. One time, we were all taking a verbal test as idiots versus morons. The teacher was asking questions out loud to each student, going back and forth between each of the 2 teams. We were being graded for it. I kept telling the 2 girls who sat next to me what the question was that the teacher would ask. I already knew the answers. They looked at me and could not believe it. They asked me how I did it. I told them there is an eye in my hand that tells me everything before it happens. It really did not matter what I said at that point, as we all walked out with A+ to that test. This was the Eye of Horus that in the spirit realm really was in my hand and really did affect my life in the physical realm, including by giving me knowledge of questions and answers to that test, among other things. I'm like getting squirmy. Can I have a second? Wow, so that goes to 16. Hang on. I gotta see how much grueling this is gonna be. 9 more pages, I think I can get through it. Excuse me. Can I have like 2 minutes? I want to eat cottage cheese. I'm starving, really. I only ate twice today so far. Okay, forgive me. Mm. I'm hungry. I don't know, maybe this video won't take that long. Maybe it'll only take another hour. That would be nice, right? I would thoroughly enjoy that to happen. Where am I? Where have I left off? Alright, the psychoanalyst, next chapter. Oh, well, first, Regine. Wait. Where am I? Regina Jackson. It's great to, see you, honey. Jesper. It's good to see all of you. Okay. So. It's up too high, that's why. Much better. I can't wait till that pot roast is done. It's not going to be done until 2 in the morning. I'll be up though. Okay, so you guys ready? Have a good night, Karen. Sweet dreams. Alright, so alright. The psychoanalyst. A teacher in school noticed me zoning out. When she would call my name, I would not answer her. She could not get me to snap out of it. She called home to my grandmother. She was concerned because of this behavior. Otherwise, my art teacher said I was the most polite kid in class and never gave her a problem. When my biological mother was told, she really did not pay any mind to it. She did not believe me about anything I tried to share with her until my half-sister started saying how a red bald man was hiding in her toys. The next door neighbor strongly suggested that my mother take me to a Messianic rabbi and said she knew the name of one. Upon hearing her suggestion, I had an awake vision of a Messianic rabbi blowing on a shofar with a prayer cloth over him that had a blue star and a blue lamb printed on the back. I wanted to go because the nightmares I had were always of war, death, and blood. I was under spiritual attack from fallen entities. I really had an innate feeling to draw closer to God. Sadly, my biological mother took me to a psychoanalyst who smoked too many cigarettes. During my session, she would choke me out with her smoke. I had bad bronchial asthma at the time. I had to tell this doctor everything, and then she would tell my biological mother, which made everything worse for me. My biological mother was always yelling at me, saddling me with her responsibilities, and making my life more difficult. The psychoanalyst told my biological mother to take me to play the lottery because I had powerful psychic abilities. I hated that I was forced to tell her, or anyone for that matter, about my dreams. The things in my dreams came true and were brutally terrifying. I did not understand everything that was happening to me. My dreams were more real to me than this physical world. Do not fret and worry. I never gave my biological mother the winning lotto numbers. I do not use my spiritual gifts for personal gain. The neighbor who suggested the Messianic rabbi came to my biological mother and told her the psychoanalyst she was taking me to was not even licensed to practice in the state of New Jersey, and to please reconsider taking me to the Messianic rabbi. My biological mother would have to have nothing to do with God and Jesus, but at least I was able to stop being forced to go to that doctor. Later in life, God would lead me to the Messianic rabbi he allowed me to have a vision of. The nightmares continued, and the psychoanalyst had done nothing helpful for me. As the years went on, I would have nightmares of World War III, nuclear bombs, radiation, children suffering and being murdered. The spiritual attacks were never ending and seemed to happen every night. There was the Hat Man. He looked like Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. He would come out of the bathroom. One night he took off his hat and swung his arm behind him. One time he took off his hat and he swung his arm. As he swung his arm forward, he charged at me and his arm went right through me like a chainsaw. There were the shadow people who whispered and lingered in all the corners of this old house I had to live in with my biological mother. There were those entities that looked like eyeballs. They would come out of the corners of the room and get really close to my face. Therefore, when I woke up from sleep, I would scream, paralyzed in fright. Then the eyeballs would sink back into the corners of the ceilings and walls. In addition, an entity always got right by my face when I woke up. It scared me and then disappeared backwards. It tormented me and would get right on top of me. At nighttime, I would wake in such a terrible fright. I would run from bed as fast as I could, take two steps down the entire flight of stairs. I would be running to flee the house. To this day, I do not like when people startle me or yell, "Boo!" around a corner to get me to jump, because it reminds me of that thing. I suffered in silence, and if I did tell a friend, they thought there was something wrong with me because they never experienced anything like it. One girl terminated our friendship in high school because of this stuff. Buying my first Holy Bible. At 16 years old, I bought my first Holy Bible. I went searching for answers. I had nightmares and dreams coming true all my life. The New Age philosophies and occult did not make sense and left me with more questions than I started with. I put down the tarot cards and picked up the Holy Bible. First, I read Revelation. While reading, I was reminded of the dreams I had throughout my life of the world ending. I was scared and feared to die a horrible death. I asked God to spare me from the coming doom. I did not fully understand Revelation, but I gave God my word at that moment that when the time came, I would warn everyone, including the bullies from school, that Jesus is returning and to get right with him. I proceeded to read Genesis all the way through to Numbers. I followed it and started to understand God's ways. Sadly, I put down the Bible and stopped reading it. I was 16 and more focused on my friends and having fun. Turning to Jesus at 18. After high school, I met a group of people who told me about Jesus' gospel. They were congregants to a Baptist church close to my home. They told me that Jesus died for my sins, and to enter heaven, I would have to believe in God's Son and accept him as my Savior. I stated how much I wanted to make sure it had nothing to do with Catholicism. I did not agree with people seeking forgiveness from God through another man, the priest, and not Jesus. Also, Catholics have steps to take that are prerequisites for acceptance by Jesus. I did not agree with not being allowed to take communion until fulfilling these steps. I accepted Jesus as my Savior in 1994. I started to attend church on Sundays. I was studying the Holy Bible and began praying daily to God. When I asked my Baptist friends about evangelists, they told me that they were extremists praying 6 hours a day and that God does not expect us to do that. They said God is happy with us attending church only on Sundays and we do not have to be overkill in our prayers to him. When I felt comfortable, I spoke up about my nightmares of children in a cage being electrocuted and demons attacking me. They said it was in my head, and now that I was saved to Jesus, all of that would automatically stop. I confessed the dreams I had would often come true, and it concerned me since they seemed to correlate to Revelation. They told me that I was into devil divination and to pray to God, and to pray that God would take it away from me. However, when I asked God to take it away, the dreams came back stronger and more often. When I told them I dreamed of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist, they said that was okay, as sometimes God shows us things. I felt more confused than ever by this. I eventually left that Baptist church and cut off connection to those friends. Blonde, curly-haired boy 2. In 1995, I was walking through a Barnes & Noble bookstore. I had an awake vision of the same blonde, curly-haired boy, except I saw his autobiography sitting on the shelves. He was wearing a green shirt and had one eye showing, which stood out to me. I almost bought one, but walked past it instead. The person who accompanied me was one of those people from the Baptist church. One of those people that accompanied me that day, out of the blue, said, "He stole a safe." I looked back at the other person and responded, "The FBI will never find him. He is hiding way out in the middle of the desert." I kept walking past the rack of his books, not giving this any further mind. At the time, our shepherd was speaking through this other person from that Baptist church that was walking with me through Barnes & Noble that day. That was supernatural knowledge given to them because they would not have known this. They didn't even know who the blonde curly-haired boy was in the first place. Wait. There's a big, huge part missing from this. Okay, so that was in 1995. I'm walking through Barnes & Noble bookstore. All right. So I see this blonde, curly-haired boy's autobiography on the shelf. Okay. The blonde-haired curly boy did not steal the safe until 1999 to have to go and flee the U.S. and hide in the desert in Mexico, I believe. The FBI never found him. It wasn't until, I think, 2011 that this blonde, curly-haired boy's book, it was 2011 that this guy's book was released. So in 1995, I'm having an awake vision in a Barnes & Noble bookstore in Bridgewater, New Jersey. And the person who wrote the autobiography didn't steal the safe until 1999, and their book was not written and released until 2011. So that part was left out of this book. I'm going to have to go back through this. Anyway, college. My college years were not that great either. I hated school, and it took all my effort to pull a C. 2.0 grade point average. I majored in accounting. I never did finish as I still have one course to complete my 2-year associate's degree. Throughout my college years, I continued to have dreams come true about my life and other people's lives. Evil spirits kept haunting me. The nightmares were just as bad now as they had ever been when Graham had to sleep in the same room as me when I was a younger kid. One night in particular, I woke up from a deep slumber and I felt paralyzed. I felt an evil presence at the foot of my bed. It was 7 feet tall, black, and mean. It grabbed my ankles and pulled me 2 feet down from the end of my bed and then vanished. The weird thing is I also remember actual people coming into my house to get me and driving me back home before the sun rose. All that seemed like a dream, too. So I continued to pass the whole event and all these events off as just bad dreams. Rockefellers want my tree. One winter, the Rockefellers showed up on my front doorstep. The company employed by the Rockefellers wanted to take one of the 3 big pine trees from my front yard. They wanted to put it up for Christmas at the Rockefeller Center in New York for people to ice skate around. In place of that tree, they were going to give my grandmother a baby blue spruce tree, which they said is the most expensive kind of tree you could buy. My grandmother told them those 3 pine trees were she planted when she was a child. Planted when she was a child by her parents, and there was no way she was going to part with them. There was no way she was going to part with these trees. She told them to get the hell off her property and go pound salt. She never liked the Rockefellers and was not about to give them anything for free. Wanting to be God's seal. One night when I was about 21 years old, someone started an argument with me. It was one of the people that had led me to Jesus when I was 18 from the Baptist church. The disagreement was about how I wanted to serve God by being one of his seals. At that time, the Baptist church had taught me that the 144,000 would be going through the Great Tribulation and would live through it until the end. I said, I want to be one of the 144,000 seals, and I want to see it. I can serve God by doing that. If I can serve God by doing that, then I want to do that. The other person said that he did not want to be a seal and that the rapture was going to spare him from the Great Tribulation. As a result of my Holy Bible studies, I disagreed with him and his church about the rapture as if it were a separate event from the seventh trumpet. Also, he and his church seemed to be saying that Baptists would be raptured, but other Christians wouldn't. Later that night, when I arrived home after the argument, I prayed to God to be his seal. I did not have a good understanding of the Holy Bible, but the story of the 144,000 seals always touched my heart and stuck out in my head. I will tie this in later in my book during the awakening session. That's, I think, the third section. Work history. During college, I began working for AT&T and dropped out of college. I worked for them for 7 years, making great money, as corporations were known for paying much better than smaller businesses. I was a secretary and backup staff for executive administrators. Sometimes I was lucky and would get a cool boss and a team full of fun managers to support. We would have cube wars and play jokes back and forth on one another. They would get the tape cops put around perimeters saying quarantined. They would disconnect my phone, so when it rang, I picked up the receiver to talk. The phone did not work. Or they would turn the volume up so high that when the phone rang, it would startle me, and I'd jump, hit the ceiling. They would hide things on me. If one of them was out sick due to a doctor's visit, they would decorate my cubicle with medical urine sample cups and different medical supplies. We would take paper clips and use rubber bands as slingshots to shoot each other. All of us white-collar workers had a blast. We had to burn off steam after a long day of pushing paper and clicking keyboard keys. After AT&T, I went on to work for Pharmacia as an executive administrative assistant, which was my absolute dream job. My boss was the best of the best of the best I ever had, and he paid me handsomely with a monthly vacation and weeks worth of personal days, a month of vacation, weeks worth of personal days. However, I did work 60, 70-hour work weeks. Every day I dressed in pin-striped suits. Free time! On the weekends, I frequented a club named Tequila Joe's in Newark, once known as America's Adult Playground. There were 4 floors. In each room and floor there was a different theme. The first floor was alternative and heavy rock. It was huge. They had a bar in the middle of the room, and on the inside of the bar was a stage with a dancer's pole and couch. People were allowed to crawl over the bar to get to the stage to dance. There were pipes on the ceiling. I'm going to pause and digress. The Sopranos, Crazy Horse in The Sopranos was shot in this nightclub. Now back to my autobiography. There were pipes on the ceiling, and the bouncers would let people hang upside down from them. They had a few sections where there were couches and coffee tables. You could sit down comfortably with a few friends and goof off. There were walls covered in carpet, and there were sticky letters and numbers you could move around just like magnets of letters and numbers that you played with as a child on the refrigerator. The second floor had 2 rooms, one with 70s music, which had a bar on one side and couches all along the perimeter of the room. Really great graffiti and wall art. On the opposite side of the hall was an 80s music room that had a swing hanging from the ceiling, and people were free to use it. The third floor was dance and techno music. There were 3 bars with a huge dance floor. Chains hung from the ceiling, and anyone was free to hop on top of the bar to dance and hang on to the chains while dancing on top of the bar. The 4th floor was reserved for staff, regulars, and whomever the owner invited. They had a basketball court up there, and sometimes people stayed overnight upstairs. As you can imagine, things were off the hook, and so were the people who frequented there. All types of people went there and raged in ages starting at 21. People from gangs, motorcycle clubs, all skin colors, and ethnic groups went there to let their hair down all weekend long. No one left that club sober. Anything and everything you wanted was there. They would have theme nights and always threw parties for each holiday. Tequila Joe's employed prop people who would wear different costumes. The props would go around, and if you opened up your mouth, they would pour mixed alcohol from a jug down your throat. Everyone knew each other there, and even though we partied hard, it was an extended family and a vacation from working all week. The after parties lasted all weekend, too. I loved it there and missed the people. I never missed a weekend. This club is no longer open and has since been turned into a church. I kid you not, it's a church. Martial arts, the next chapter. Martial arts always drew my attention. When I was 18, I took Aikido, but did not enjoy it as the instructor, sensei, always used me as the guinea pig to demonstrate new moves. I would leave there with welts on my arms, so I quit after a month. At the age of 24, I found a grandmaster from South Korea to teach me Taekwondo, Hapkido, weapons training, and tournament sparring. It was a perfect fit. I excelled at it. In 6 months, I got 3/4 of the way to my black belt when it takes a normal person 2 years to reach those levels. When I first started out training and someone would throw a punch at me, I would catch his or her fist. With the other hand, I would go to strike their elbow to break it and then go to strike their face. It was like there was something inside of me that knew the moves and had muscle memories, but as far as I knew, I had no prior formal training. Not with moves like that I was pulling out. When I first started with Grandmaster, not the moves that were coming out of me. My great Grandmaster spent time with me to stop me from making those moves and to use his moves instead. He had to retrain me. I thought nothing of it and just passed it off. I had not woken up yet and had no idea I was still an active super soldier at that time. 2000 Angel. Next chapter. In the summertime, my fiancé threw a party with a bunch of our friends. We sat outside by the fire pit, barbecuing and drinking beers. I was gazing up at the stars. I turned around on my seat to look at the stars behind me, and as I looked up, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I saw an angel flying overhead. It was huge and looked like it was dressed in gold glitter. As I watched, I tried not to react so my friends would not notice my facial expressions. I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve, and you can read me like a book. Everyone at the party would not believe it if I told them what I was seeing flying above us across the sky. No one seemed to notice me or the angel in the sky. I excused myself to go in the house and use the powder room. When I got inside, I ran into the bathroom and hid under the sink. When I looked up, I could still see the angel in the sky, like there was a skylight in the house. I understood the angel's appearance in the sky to be a signal that the 4 horsemen of Revelation were coming. After 10 minutes, I regained my composure and rejoined everyone outside. I kept looking in the sky, but the angel had passed over us and vanished. Next chapter, marriage. Dun 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 dun. Alright, so marriage. I got married. Married. I'm sorry. Married. I got married when I was 25 in Las Vegas by Merlin the Wizard at Excalibur Hotel, June 10th of 2000. I can't imagine why, but the marriage was a disaster. I thought I was marrying my best friend, but as soon as we got back home off the plane, he turned into my worst enemy. We would fight, and then it turned physical. One fight was so horrific because he punched me in both my breasts. He hit me so hard it caused nerve damage, and I lost the feeling in my breast. When I went to my father's funeral in July 2000, it hurt so bad that when people hugged me over the loss of my father, it caused excruciating pain in my breasts, and I would cry harder. After 3 months of being married to him, I filed for a divorce due to extreme cruelty. There were other reasons why, too. A lot of other reasons why. Cheating. When he found out I was divorcing him, he came after me. I made the mistake of putting my back to him. I put my back to him. He kicked me so hard in my tailbone. My tailbone fractured. I divorced him February 9th, 2001. Later, I found out he was cheating on me. I was married for 9 months and never got married again because it was such a bad experience the first time. After that, I seemed to keep picking the same type of person. To date, the only difference was their name. Checkered past. In 2001, I was arrested for 3 felonies. I was hanging around a bad crowd and did not realize it. One evening, my friend asked if I could drop him by the club before I went back home. I said sure. On our way to the club, he got a phone call. His friend's vehicle broke down and he was stranded. My friend asked if I could pick that person up. When I did, the kid with the broke down vehicle asked if I could swing by his friend's house on the way to take him home to pick up keys or tools for his van. What I did not know was the kid and his friends were buying ketamine off the internet with a fake tax ID, having it sent to a P.O. box. The FBI was involved and had set up a sting for months on these people. I showed up at the wrong place at the wrong time. I brought the kid to pick up his tools and keys. Okay, so my friend's friend, I brought that friend to pick up his tools and keys at his friend's house. And when I pulled away from that house, it was as if I stepped into a red anthill. All of a sudden, police cars surrounded us in every direction with guns, shotguns, handguns drawn. They had 3 guns and a shotgun pointed at just me, not including what they had pointed at the 2 people in my car. They asked me who I was. I responded, nobody. Nobody. We were all under arrest for possession, distribution, and intent to distribute in a school zone. There's much more to this story, but it doesn't matter. This is like the whole gist of it. I had no idea this kid was picking up drugs, and I felt like a fool that I had believed He was picking up tools and keys. The chief of police fell in love with my Stang. For the remainder of the night, he boasted how my car was now his. While I was under arrest at the cop shop that night, yeah, he was boasting how my car was his. I did not like that chief of police. When I went to Tequila Joe's, that nightclub, after my arrest, people would come up to me and apologize to me and buy me drinks. They'd come up and just say, "Holly, I am so sorry." Because I was facing hardcore time. At my arraignment, the judge was baffled at the quantity of drugs in my car. The kid had marijuana, 100 or 200 pills of ecstasy, a couple of 8 balls of cocaine, and many cases of ketamine. The judge explained to me how much trouble I was in and that I was facing at least 10 years in federal penitentiary. I pled not guilty. At that time, my attorney and I told the judge that my car had a loan on it, and if the chief of police wanted it so bad, he would have to take over the loan on it. I got my Mustang back. After that, the laws changed. If you were arrested for drug and your car was confiscated, it was your loss and you had to pay the loan on it and still lose the car itself. The hardest part was telling my grandmother what happened and the time I was facing. It took me 6 months to talk about it with her. All I asked my attorney and the judge for was that they keep me out to stay free to take care of my grandmother because there was no one else to do it. 2.5 years after my arrest, I received a letter in the mail stating that all charges were terminated. Terminated. Not dismissed. Terminated. They were not dismissed. They were terminated. I never saw the inside of a courtroom after my arraignment. My attorney's My attorney promises my gram. My attorney was diagnosed with emphysema. Excuse me, I gotta start over. My grandmother was diagnosed with emphysema. I asked her if I could be the one to take care of her because she and Papa raised me all my life. I did not trust anyone else to do it the way I knew I could. She was so sick in the last year of her life. When the time came, she wanted to give me power of attorney and make me an executor of her will. I called my attorney. He came out to our house with his secretary. Just before my grandmother signed the documents, I got up from the table and told her that if she felt she was under duress or if she felt that I was doing something wrong, now was her time to tell my attorney. I also told her that if she felt pressure that I would move out or leave to make her feel better. I grabbed my Marlboro Lights, went outside for about 15 minutes. I left my grandmother, my attorney, his secretary alone to discuss things. While I was outside, my grandmother made my attorney promise to something. I will touch on this during the awakening section of my book. So keep this as a note. This, my attorney promising my grandmother. When I came back inside, everybody was smiling at me. My attorney handed my grandmother and I a pen and showed us where to sign. His secretary notarized everything on the spot. In the months to follow, Gram fell sicker and sicker. It came to a point that I began giving her at-home hospice care. I fed her, bathed her, and gave her medication every 2 hours. The rest of the family was either conveniently not available or on too many drugs, prescriptions, or otherwise to do for her what she needed. I loved her so much. I was extremely attached to her. She was everything to me, and I grew up in that house, so my home was always with her. I idolized my grandmother so much. She was a wonderful woman and my best friend. She and I laughed and talked about everything all the time. To see her so sick broke my heart. She would struggle to breathe. She had a CPAP to push air into her lungs with an oxygen tank pumping oxygen into her nose. Gram passing. Next chapter. During this time, I worked for pharmacy, and my grandmother became sicker with emphysema until she was given 6 months to live. I decided to stay home to give her around-the-clock hospice care. I could not imagine life without her. I bathed her, fed her, and changed her diaper. Sleep was a distant memory for me, as every 2 hours I had to administer medicine to her to keep her mouth moist. She was on oxygen, and the BiPAP machine forced air into her lungs and made it to make it easier for her to breathe. She was on morphine, so that dried out her lips. That's why I had to keep her mouth moist. I had to give her liquid drops of morphine every 2 hours. She passed away January 30th, 2002. A few months later, Graham's son and daughter decided to sell the house and she left to me. She left to me part of it. But my Graham's son and daughter decided to sell it. Since they wanted the money and had absolutely no consideration for me or what I wanted, I lost my home. It was the only home I had ever known. I wanted to buy that house and live the rest of my life there. I found it devastating to lose my Graham and my home. Everything I had once known and loved was gone. They acted like vultures. Giving up my dreams. When Graham died, I went to live with my biological mother and her family for a short time. My biological mother kept saying repeatedly how she had a dream that my half-sister would die in a car accident. I got sick and tired of hearing this as it felt she was calling forth death. One night when I could not take it any longer, I went into my bedroom, got down on the floor on my knees and forehead before God. I told him if my biological mother was correct to please take away my psychic abilities and the dreams that come true. I asked him to please save my half-sister, so should my mother be correct. A year or two later, my half-sister was in a bad car accident. The car went off the road. The passenger did not have a seatbelt on, fell out the window and was crushed by the guardrail. The kid in the back seat of the vehicle was bruised a little, but he had his seatbelt on and was safe. My half-sister hurt her wrist. She too was safe. God answered my prayer, taking my spiritual abilities away from me for about 7 to 10 years. But my half-sister's life was spared. Disabled. Next chapter. In the summer of 2004, I was bit by a brown recluse spider. I was sleeping on the couch, and when I rolled over, I was really awakened by bad pain on the back of my right arm above the elbow. When I sat up, I looked at my arm and got creeped out as I saw a crushed spider stuck to my arm. I pulled off my shirt, and the spider fell to the ground. When I went to find something to pick it up with, the spider suddenly scampered off. It left a mark on my arm. After a couple of weeks, there was a bullseye on my arm. I contracted Lyme's disease from it and began getting sick from its venom. Spider's venom stays in your system for approximately 8 years. By 2006, doctors had me on 33 prescriptions. Lyme's disease tore my body down and left me with fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and a slew of other health problems. I became extremely depressed as I could not get out of bed and slowly became bedridden. I would panic because I felt weak and unable to fend for myself, let alone protect myself. For 2 years, my boyfriend at the time fed me as my fingers and hands cramped up, becoming deformed. He helped me shower and took me to all my doctor appointments. I filed for disability benefits for my physical problems. Since I was considered too young, they would only give it to me for diagnoses of PTSD, depression, anxiety, panic, bipolar, I fought the state of New Jersey for 8 years and was finally granted full disability through these diagnoses instead. I did not understand why it took any other person 1.5 to 2 years to get their disability, why I had to fight for it and hire attorneys for 8. Later in life, I found out why it took them that long to give it to me. I will discuss this in later chapters, why it took them so long to give it to me. Hint, glaring big hint. I'm an augmented soldier from our government and military. That's right there. All right, moving on. I was on so much medication and so sick that I stopped living and writing poetry and accepted my life as I once knew it as over. It was over. My hopes of getting back to martial arts training were crushed. My hopes of living a normal, healthy life were crushed. And now I was left a shell of a person. For 3 years, I went to physical therapy and began to walk again. One night, I got so frustrated that my fingers and hands were becoming deformed from rheumatoid arthritis that I could not even hold a pencil, let alone a fork, that I did something about it. I took my hands and straightened them out as best I could on the counter. With the other hand, I held the heaviest book I could find, and with all my might, I slammed it down on top of my hand until it was straight again. I saw stars before my eyes. Next, I did it to the other hand. Every month I had to visit 8 doctors. When they saw my hands and fingers straight again, they asked me what happened. I confessed what I did, and they got very mad at me. My response to them was that my fingers are straight now, which is more than they ever did for me. I was able to begin slowly start using my hands and fingers again. All right, between chapters. Hey, Rodimus Prime, Peanut, Trunk Monkeys. Who haven't I said hi to? Chris. Who am I missing? James, Regina, Esther. Did I get everybody? Jesper. Did I get you guys? All right, I'm not ignoring you. I just got to kind of read. It's great to see you, Rodimus Prime. Okay, so. What? Okay. Next chapter, Death Experience, 2007. At the beginning of 2007, I was strangled to death on my kitchen floor by an ex-boyfriend. He was drunk and had taken Xanax. He was out of it. He got mad at me for taking so long at the laundromat. The second I came in the door, he was yelling at me. I went in the kitchen and started to pour his case of beer down the sink. Oh. Don't ever do that, guys. Don't ever do that. He got very mad at me and came after me. I could not escape. He grabbed my neck. With his hands, he lifted me up by the neck and held me against the wall with my feet dangling off the floor. His eyes looked completely black and he said, "How does it know to feel you're going to die tonight?" He then took me by the neck and slammed me to the floor. I squirmed to get away. He then sat on top of me and with both of his hands around my neck, plus one of his knees pushing into my neck, he started to choke me as hard as he could. I could not breathe. I could not break free. I could not break loose from him, and I knew it was over. I called out to God. I said, "I don't want to die." There was a picture of Jesus that I hung over my door. I could see it, and I said, "Jesus, I'm sorry. Please forgive me." I could not take a breath or get any air. I kicked my feet so hard that my one foot went through the side of the cabinet wall. The ex-boyfriend had choked me to death. I landed in darkness, but I could see my spiritual body in a white gown. When I looked at the darkness I was in, it moved and eyes appeared. I got scared. All of a sudden, I felt 2 hands at my back, which lifted my body up and carried me out of the darkness. I heard a voice whisper to me, marry me. The very next moment, I was pushed back up into this physical world again. I was back on my kitchen floor, and the ex was still on top of me. His grip had loosened a little bit. I felt 2 breaths of air go into my lungs, just enough to give me energy. Then I saw a vision of my great grandmaster from martial arts, and I heard the same voice who said, marry me. I heard the voice say, it's now or never. I went to sit up, but could not get the ex-boyfriend who was still sitting on top of my chest off. He weighed 180 pounds, sitting on the top of my chest, up by my collarbone. I was only 110. What I weigh now. I heard that voice again. It's now or never. So I went to sit up, and then those 2 white arms, those 2 hands that carried me out of the darkness and pushed me back into this real world where I was given 2 breaths of air and brought back to life. Well, those 2 white arms, those 2 hands that carried me out of the darkness of death were then pushing at my back. They pushed at my back. So when I went to sit up that second time, I was able to rise just enough with the help of those 2 arms at my back. I was able to grab a hold of the counter with 1 arm. Once I had a grip, I pulled as hard as I could. The boyfriend rolled off my chest. I rose to my feet and began running out of the house. Out of my house. I was barefoot and in night clothes. It was the dead of winter and raining outside. I fled the house and ran outside and down the block like a bolt of lightning. I realized I had to stop and go back to my home to call the police. When I came back, the ex-boyfriend was standing between me and the phone. I thought to myself, I am calling the police and you're not stopping me. We charged at each other head on like bulls. I slammed into him so hard that it knocked him off his feet, throwing him backwards, and he landed inside of the large cabinet behind him. So I threw him back into through the cabinet and into the inside of the cabinet. So he broke the cabinet door, and now he's inside the cabinet. I then grabbed the phone, ran back outside, and called for help. I had not realized the depth of things that had just happened to me. I was in shock. After that death experience, there came one night in particular that I was in rare form. I dressed nice with my hair and makeup done as if I were a model. I grabbed my purse, and as I rounded the corner and entered into my living room, I saw Satan leaning against my piano. He was in slacks and a button-down white collar shirt. I took one look at him and said, "Come on, Satan. Come out with me. Let's paint the town red. I'm in a mood, and I'm going out." He looked at me, shook his head, and just looked down. He would not budge. It seemed like this time he was leery of me. He would not come out dancing with me. I walked past him and locked the door behind me. When I returned home that evening, he was not there. Hey, Andrew, it's good to see you. Only between chapters or breaks have I been saying hi to people. Excuse me. I'm about wrapping this up, okay, guys? So we've only got a couple more pages. I think it's let me finish. Next chapter, fur babies. Sava, my cat, found me in the summer of 2009. I had company over, and when I walked them outside to their car, a little kitten jumped up onto the cement patio and started circling around my legs. As my company waved goodbye to me, I called out to them to look at the kitten that just popped out of thin air. The little kitten walked into my front door, into the hallway, and then waited for me to open the second door into my apartment. Once I let that kitten inside, she never left. She's still here. I fell in love with her. I called her Seva because I decided to save a kitten. However, she saved my heart when she found me. Having her gave me a routine and something to take care of once again. I was needed again. I missed taking care of my grandmother and felt very lonely for many years following her death. In 2012, I was dating someone who desperately wanted a dog. He found one on Craigslist. When we went to pick the dog up, she attached herself to me immediately. The couple I bought her from named her Keeper. She would follow me around the house, still does, but had bad separation anxiety, which caused her to go to the bathroom all over the floor. The boyfriend did not want her. Plus, I didn't think it was a good match. He took her to the pound. Immediately afterward, I started to feel pain, separation anxiety over what had happened. I began praying to Jesus, asking him to help me get Keeper back. The pound would not give her to me, so I got a friend to go get her from the pound for me. It was the longest 13 days of my life, waiting to get Keeper back. Jesus answered my prayer, and my friend brought her to me. At that time, I was in an abusive relationship. On one occasion, the guy punched Keeper, and it upset me. The second time he punched Keeper so hard I heard it. I stepped in between him and Keeper, shouting at him that he would have to go through me to get to her from now on. I kicked him out of the house, got a restraining order, and kept the dog. To this day, Keeper and Seva are still with me. I know my pets are considered rescues, but honestly, they rescued me. Chasing down an alien aircraft. In 2013, 8 years ago, in 2013, I was visiting a neighbor. In 2013, I was visiting a neighbor in the apartment complex where I lived and had my own place. As the neighbor and I talked outside the porch steps, he pointed to the building behind me. I heard excitement in his voice as he said, "Holly, look over at that. It's an alien." I turned around to see an alien aircraft hovering over the apartment building right across the street in broad daylight. Broad daylight. I said, "Eddie, it is an alien aircraft." He said, I have never seen one before. I started to walk across the street towards it, and I just happened to call out to Jesus and say, "Jesus, make it go away. Make it go away." Then I saw that, no, I got to change this. I got to change this because this isn't right. I was like, I look at that thing, I'm like, "Hey, you can't do that. You can't do that." I didn't even call out to Jesus because I didn't even know to call out to Jesus yet at this point in 2013. So I got to go back through this whole editing thing and edit it some more. But I was yelling up at this alien aircraft, "Hey, you can't do that. You can't do that. Stop." Then I saw the alien aircraft leap over a couple of buildings and stop. It just kind of leaped and stopped and hovered again. And continued hovering. So I started running at it, right? It leaped again to the next block and hovered over a next set of apartment buildings. I kept running at it and aloud I'm like, "Oh, no, you don't. You can't do that. Stop. Suddenly, the alien aircraft takes off, out of sight in a split second. I didn't know to call out to Jesus at this point in 2013. So anyway. When it went away, I turned around and headed back to my neighbor Eddie. I said, "Wow, I can't believe we just saw an alien aircraft." Eddie looked at me and replied, "What are you talking about? I didn't see anything." I was like, "Okay." He goes, "What are you talking about? I didn't see anything." Eddie had a blank stare in his eyes. I continued to talk to him and state how he was the one to point it out to me. He kept denying that he saw anything and acted as if nothing had happened. I know what I saw, but I dropped the subject with him quickly since he seemed to be in a trance. Yeah, I come back, I'm like, "Eddie, did you see that? I can't believe we just saw an alien aircraft." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what am I talking about? You're the one that pointed the thing out to me. What do you mean, what am I talking about?" He's like, "I don't know what you're talking about, Holly." I'm like, "The alien aircraft that was just across the street I'm like, "The alien aircraft, you pointed it. I just went chasing down the blocks. You saw me run down blocks after this thing." "I don't know what you're talking about, Holly." He looked like he was in a trance, and even shaking him wouldn't have even helped. Ugh. Alright, so at this point, I'm going to stop. We are at page 25, right? 25, no, 26. This book is approximately 92 pages, so I'd say, and we're a little bit about a third through it. The next two sections, section 2, which is called Deep Underground Military Bases, Super Soldier Days, being an active super soldier. So the second section is Deep Underground Military Bases. The third and last section is Two Worlds Collide, Awakening and Deprogramming. Those will probably take a few more hours, longer than this video took to make. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the reading of the first section of my autobiography. How long have I been running for? 2 hours and 15 minutes. Good, good, good. That's awesome. All right, guys. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for hanging out with me. Terry Christ, thank you so much. It's great to see all of you guys. I actually asked for, I told YouTube, not to let the chat go, but it still ran. I guess it's good. Everything went nice and smooth. YESHUA blessings, everyone. It's Friday. Yeah, happy Friday night. I love you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.